All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is a Dynasty episode. We've got another great industry guest joining us today. I am Adam Azer, joined by Heath Cummings, who's having a rough morning. First of all, he selected the wrong thing in the Twitter poll. He clicked on the wrong name in one of my Twitter polls, and you can't get that back. You cannot get that vote back. So that was bad. But also, he just found out that he made this guest, Matt Price, who I'll introduce to you soon, wake up mega early because he didn't know he was on the West Coast. So rough morning for you, Heath.
Really missed opportunity for you, Adam. I thought you were going to take a jab at my Celtics, and I have an Azer level bad sports take whenever, like later in the show, because people don't care to hear about that now.
What happened to the Celtics? Jaylen Brown, that thing?
Jaylen Brown's out. They're in the play-in game. It doesn't really matter. And my bad take is that the Celtics should tank the rest of their season, including the 2 play-in games, to get a better draft pick.
Oh yeah, you're probably, that's very Doug Peterson of you, and you're probably right. Let's bring on our guest. He's Matt Price of Dynasty League Football. He's a senior writer for Dynasty League Football, and he's the co-host of the DLF Dynasty podcast. And he is a good sport, joining us super early in the morning for him out on the West Coast. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Heath and Adam. I'm really excited to be here. Love the show and excited to talk some Dynasty, especially rookies, man.
Yeah, thank you. I love all the content you guys create, and I was in a short-lived Dynasty League with the DLF guys, and finished in second place. So, woo! And that was just 1 year of a Dynasty League. We were unable to keep it going. It's challenging. You know, Dynasty Leagues are challenging. You got to get buy-in. How many are you in? And, if people out there want to start one, talk about the commitment that it takes. You got to make sure you get the right people that are willing to keep it going.
It really is all about the group, and those of us that put out content, we have it a little bit easier because we can kind of pick and choose our league mates. Like I play with I wouldn't say a very select group, and I do have people that come in new, but we have a little bit broader reach, so we can really handpick the group of people that we're going to play with. It's obviously a little more difficult for just your average Joe out there on Twitter following all of us. But there are resources. The Dynasty League Football forums are a great place to go to find people that have been, you can tell that have been around the block for a while. And those people that have more experience are typically the ones that are going to stick around a little bit longer. But yeah, if it's just a bunch of people that you you know nothing about, then it can be difficult. Another good resource is safeleagues.com. Our buddy Scott Fish, he is the commissioner of those. I'm sure everybody, I don't really need to introduce Scott Fish, but if you want a legit commissioner service, then that's a great place to go as well. And that you're going to get taken care of there.
And I think it's really nice of Matt for you to not tell Adam that Dynasty League is actually still going and thriving. They just kicked Adam out of the league. It was short-lived for him.
And I'm in 15, and I'm a commissioner for 4 of them. So it's definitely a lot of work, but it's very rewarding. And I've been playing Dynasty for almost more than 20 years now at this point, I think. So I come up with crazy league ideas. Like I have a few charity-based leagues that are called the Red List Leagues, where we donate about 30% of the money every year to different wildlife conservation organizations. And those are what we call double copy leagues. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but basically, let's say there's 24 teams in the league, then there are 2 copies of every single player. So it allows you to have more trade partners. So like, let's say I want to go trade for Najee Harris, right? This person says, no, I'm not trading him for anything. You can go to the next guy that has him and send him a similar offer. And then sometimes that even spurs on more activity in the league, because what you see one person make a trade for a player and they're like, somebody else is like, oh, I would pay that for that particular player. So all of a sudden it can set off these chain reactions of trades and kind of increase the activity in the league.
That is so interesting. A double copy league. So do you have any specific memories of playing a team that had a lot of the same players that were on your team? Or, oh my gosh, we have 5 of the same starters.
Yeah, it does work out that way sometimes, where the league, where you meet a team in the playoffs that has, there's like 4 or 5 of your 10 starters or whatever are in common. So you're really playing like a 5-man fantasy game at that point. So yeah, that definitely happens.
Yeah, Heath, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't want to intimidate people too much on Dynasty Leagues. There's one good thing about Dynasty Leagues. If you are in a lot of them, or if you're in a lot of fantasy leagues and you want to start doing a Dynasty League, I think they require less time during the season, less the waiver wire specifically. because the rosters are so deep. So you're probably not spending so much time on Tuesday night making waiver claims, which can be quite a chore if you're in a lot of fantasy leagues. It could take you well over an hour to make your waiver claims. The dynasty leagues, for me, are the ones that take the least amount of time. Fair?
I think that can be fair, depending on, like, there's a wide range of roster requirements and stuff like that. And if anything, like, you kind of, if you're in a league where you've got 40 roster spots and you're not really changing out that much for need in a specific week, you are still trying to find somebody that's going to help you a month from now or a year from now or 2 years from now on the waiver wire. So, like, the thing that I've moved towards, because I think I don't even know actually how many leagues I have. I was able in January to walk away from like 3, and I was so proud of myself, and I've added 3 since then. But the last 3 I've added have been actually dynasty best ball leagues. And the reason, because, like, and two of those don't even have weekly waivers. Like, your roster is your roster going into week 1. So that's a way that I can add more leagues and still keep my sanity.
Okay. Well, we are going to talk about Matt's rankings. We got some Twitter polls to kind of gauge. I wanted to gauge where people are on some of the top running backs and some of the top wide receivers, not just the rookies, but comparing, would you rather have Najee Harris or Dalvin Cook in a dynasty league, with the age difference being about 3 years, those types of questions. Would you rather have Devontae Adams or Jamar Chase? So, we'll get into some of those Twitter polls that I posted this morning. Some buy lows and sell highs in dynasty leagues. If we have time, we'll try to get to your emails. I failed on that yesterday. Probably going to fail on that today. fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. But we will dedicate some time this week to your emails and your Apple Podcast questions. So please keep them coming. Matt, what did you think about the NFL draft just in general, in terms of its impact in fantasy?
Now that I've settled and marinated on a little bit, I feel a lot better about it, at least in terms of fantasy purposes, right? During the draft, most of the landing spots were kind of disappointing. I feel like a bunch of them landed in places where we're going to have questions, especially with, we'll get into it, but outside of the top 4 to 5 players in a one quarterback league, there's just questions everywhere for me. But the more and more you look at it, they do have these question marks, but it does start to feel a little bit deeper. I think you can get down into the late end of the first round in a rookie draft, early second round pick, and still have players that you feel reasonably good about. They're definitely going to have question marks still, but the longer I've thought about it, the better I feel about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Was there a rookie that went later than you thought that you really like?
Yeah, I would say Dyami Brown was one I could throw out there. He was at one point in the offseason, he was up to like wide receiver 6 for me. And he definitely went later in the draft. I don't have his exact draft pick off the top of my head, but, landed in a good spot where he's going to be across from a player that we already know is kind of the alpha one. And he has Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's going to throw the ball all over the field. So Dyami Brown averaged over 20 yards per catch in college. So if he can be that deep threat and that kind of that DGAF guy, as it were, for Ryan Fitzpatrick, then I think that could work out pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he went 82nd overall to Washington, and I think he averaged 20 yards per catch every year in college.
Yeah,
consistently
impressive.
Yeah, and there was first round buzz on him. Who's that one player that might sneak into the first round?
Mm-hmm.
Javonte Williams got a lot of buzz, and Dyami Brown got a little buzz as well out of UNC. Heath, how about you? Was there a rookie that went later than you thought that you really like?
Yeah, I don't know that I can really say that right now, just because I do think draft capital matters a lot. But I will say, like, the main thing, and we talked about it a little bit already, and I wonder Matt's take on this. Like, I thought the biggest takeaway from this draft was we thought this running back class was weak, and the NFL liked it less than we did. Like, it's just, there are situations where guys like Michael Carter or Trey Sermon could end up in a good role to where we like him for a couple of years, but I just don't know that there's more than 2.5 meaningful starters for fantasy purposes at running back.
Yeah, Matt, where are you at on Javonte Williams? Because that's the one. I mean, people seem pretty on board with Harris and ETN, but that's the one that I think causes a lot of split. So Javonte Williams being drafted early in the second round by the Denver Broncos, and what do you think?
I mean, I would have liked it better if he went to Miami, but I don't think it's a terrible, a terrible spot. Melvin Gordon was, serviceable in 2020, and he'll probably be serviceable again. But Javonte Williams played in a committee in college with Michael Carter, so he's not going to be a stranger to that. And I think it's going to be pretty clear out of the gate that at this point in his career, I don't think Melvin Gordon does necessarily anything better than Javonte Williams will be. Probably pass blocking. He's got more experience in that, right? And he's a bit of an underrated receiver, but Javonte Williams can do those things too. So at the beginning, I'm sure it'll be a committee, but if Melvin Gordon slips up at all, if he has any kind of nagging injury, you could definitely see Javonte Williams taking over there. I do think he's a bit of a, about maybe a half a tier to a full tier below ETN and Harris, but I still think he's a fine pick, especially in the middle of one quarterback rookie drafts.
Looking at your
and he's right. He's the last one that we really care about. We can talk about Michael Carter and Dre Sermon and the other guys, but those three are really the only ones we're going to care about for fantasy, at least this season, I think.
Okay, I'm looking at your tiers right now and your rankings, and there's somebody in the Javonte Williams tier, which is the third tier, that is interesting that I had not seen this high. So I look forward to talking about that. But actually, I have to ask you about your main job. Okay, when you're not talking Dynasty, you are a zookeeper. Is that right?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so what exactly? Give me the day-to-day operations of a zookeeper.
I mean, it's in charge of everything for animal husbandry and healthcare, everything from feeding and cleaning to training for medical procedures, taking animals to the hospital for medical procedures, doing public interactions, presentations, and training sessions and things like that. So basically anything you can think about to do with a zoo animal. And for me, it's a wide variety. I work on a team that has everything from polar bears to the smallest gazelle in the world, the smallest antelope in the world. So it's really runs the gamut. And I could be working with the largest land carnivore in the world, or I could be working with, the smallest herbivore in the world. So it's a pretty wide variety of stuff I get to work with.
The amount of stories that you must have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't even know where to
We just do a podcast about this now.
Probably.
Do you want a quick story?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. It doesn't even have to be that quick. Go ahead.
We were a few years ago. A buddy of mine, where we were at the Holiday Bowl. We were watching a football game, and he turned over to me and said, "How many people in this stadium do you think also work with polar bears and lions?" And we were like, "We're probably the only one, right?" And then we took it further than that. I posted something like, "How many people today had polar bear pee in their eye today?" And I wonder how many people in the world had that in that specific day. When you think about the 7 billion people in the world, how many more people had that? And that came during a training session. We had a bear that had a bit of a growth in her area, in her region, as it were. So we had to train her to allow us to collect samples from that area and also apply like a topical medication. And she didn't like the way I was touching that area, I guess. And she turned around and took a swipe and got some, and she had just peed in that location. So of course didn't have a face shield on and got some of that right in the eye.
Oh my God. Just another day at the office.
Just another day.
That is okay. More zookeeper questions later. Did you see the story about this leopard that is on the loose in China?
I haven't heard about that one. I heard about the tiger that's on the loose in Houston, though, apparently, that some private owner has.
That's not good either. My house yesterday, yeah.
Oh, wow.
What? Really?
No.
Oh, okay. Authorities in eastern China are hunting for the last of 3 leopards that escaped from a safari park.
Oh, wow.
So what do you do if an animal escapes?
Well, I mean, hopefully it doesn't get off of zoo grounds. Like that's the first step is it shouldn't get out of its enclosure, its habitat, but it also should not get out of the entire zoo. Right. So at that point, then I think local authorities do become involved. Hopefully they do include the zoo because they're the ones that know the animals and they're the ones that are going to administer. Hopefully they're going to administer some sedatives so that we can safely recover the animal. But there are some animals that are on. I mean, I can go into so much. There are animals that are on the do not ask list in terms of like if you can shoot to kill. If it's a dangerous animal, around people, the animal is unfortunately always going to lose that situation. But Yeah, I mean, they typically, like, especially if it's not a leopard, if it's an animal like some hoofstock, like a gazelle or an antelope or something, they get out of the exhibit and they're like, oh my gosh, where am I? What is going on? I don't know the surroundings. I just want to get back in. You find them like trying to figure out how to jump back in. But with a leopard or something like that, you definitely have to use some anesthesia and try to take it down with the tranquilizer dart or something, if you can avoid, shooting the animal for real.
Okay, well, we'll get some more fun, uplifting stories.
Yeah, way to bring us down, Adam.
There were a lot of questions I could have asked, and I asked definitely the wrong one. Listen, everybody, you got to know what's on CBS Sports HQ this week. CBS Sports HQ is your home to start your sports news day and make fun of the Celtics with live updates kicking off each morning at 8 a.m. Eastern. HQ is always your home ahead of the evening's action with live picks from the best analysts and cappers in the sports world each day at 6 p.m. Eastern. On Wednesday, NFL experts will be breaking down the 2021 schedule. We'll be doing that on our podcast, too. And our cappers will be making Preakness picks ahead of Saturday's race. So check out HQ on your computer on CBSSports.com or via the CBS Sports app on your mobile phone or TV. It's always free and it's always on. Heath, I did a fun game with my friends last weekend. At the last minute, I assigned all of them and their spouses a Kentucky Derby horse, and me and my spouse as well. And I won. I signed all of the ones that had a shot to win, and my horse won. But do you think I need to cede the title because of the PEDs?
We actually were out to dinner as a family, and we all chose a horse. We were getting ready to watch, and my wife won. And I've already told her that she not only had to cede her title, but she has been banned from future competition for choosing a horse that was doping.
Okay, then I will take it half that way. I will give up the title, but I'm not banning myself from future competition. Heath, I want you just give me your quick thoughts on the news and notes so we can get back to Dynasty. Jacksonville's going to sign Tim Tebow to play tight end. He's 33 years old, but they're talking about using him in different ways. Do you think Tim Tebow could actually be a goal line vulture?
Let's get back to Dynasty.
It wouldn't shock me. It's all I'm saying.
I remember, like, it seems like when I was on the Fantasy Baseball podcast, we used to have these conversations. Do you think Tim Tebow could do this? Do you think Tim Tebow, like, it's tight end. I think I saw that the betting markets have set his over under for receiving yards this season at 12.5, and it's even money. So the most likely scenario has to be that Tim Tebow doesn't play real football. But if he does, anything is possible. He's got that connection with Urban Meyer, and that seems to be as important, if not more important, than anything else.
Indianapolis is going to sign left tackle Eric Fisher to a 1-year, $9.4 million deal. They need to replace the retired Anthony Costanzo. This is a great signing of a veteran left tackle, but he did tear his Achilles in the AFC Championship game, and there's some question about whether or not Fisher will be ready for week one.
I would be shocked, but I guess that's a little easier injury for linemen than for running backs and receivers, but that's still at his age. Maybe he may be somebody that could help him in the second half, though.
And Falcons running back coach Desmond Kitching said it's an open competition at running back. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll see if they add anybody before the Eagles do. So that's all the Eagles do these days. All right, Matt, let's talk about your rankings for one quarterback leagues. You gave us some rankings for one quarterback dynasty leagues, and it's just the rookies. And Jamar Chase and Kyle Pitts are in the top tier. So discuss.
Yeah, I just think these are the two players that I'm sure if you want to nitpick, you can come up with question marks for them. But these two, I think, far and away are the players that are the most talented at their position, and that just feel the safest. For Jamar Chase, it's been said a million times, one of the best prospects since Amari Cooper. There's not really any holes in his game. The only thing you can really nitpick is that we didn't see him in 2020, right? So is he the same player? It seems like he probably is. We know that wide receivers, especially if they produce when they are younger, then they are more likely to succeed in the NFL. And he's reunited with his college quarterback. Sometimes I think that is overrated. If going back to, like, I don't know if you remember when Andrew Luck drafted, they also drafted Coby Fleener, and we thought, Coby Fleener reunited with Andrew Luck, it's going to be be everything we thought it was going to be. But in this particular situation, I do think it will matter for these guys. It seems like more and more, at least I'd like to think that more and more of the NFL teams are starting to include their franchise quarterbacks in their decision-making process. So hopefully he had a bit of a say in that and getting Chase on the team. And then with Kyle Pitts, I mean, he's the best tight end prospect of ever since I've been playing this game. And he walks into a situation where I just don't know what they're going to do. What our defense is going to do with that passing offense. You've got to have your two top corners probably on Julio if he's going to stick around, and Calvin Ridley, and Pitts he's too fast for the linebackers. He's too big for the third corner and the safeties. So he's going to eat, I think. And another part of Pitts there is Matt Ryan has been leading the league in attempts basically for the last several years. 626 last season pass attempts, 608 or more in each of the last 3 seasons, and 197 targets last year went to Hayden Hurst and Russell Gage. So I know Julio missed about 7 games, so that number will come down, but there's plenty of targets there for Kyle Pitts to succeed in year 1, despite the stigma that tight ends take forever to produce. I think we have to get off of that with a guy like Pitts, who is basically a receiver. The only designation there is that he is a tight end. And, if we're going to treat him like a wide receiver that can come in and produce right away and just ignore that tight end designation, then I think we'll be pretty successful with him this season.
So you think he'll have a big rookie year?
Big is strong. But yeah, I think basically if he comes out and finishes as a top 12, top 10 tight end, he's going to be the tight end 1 in Dynasty next season. He's 11 years younger than Travis Kelce. George Kittle has, some inability to stay healthy at times. So I just don't think there's much of a chance for failure for Pitts at this point. It's not really a big ask to finish as a back end tight end 1. Basically on a weekly basis, if you score a touchdown, you're a tight end 1, right? So I think he can come in and be that top 10, maybe even top 8 or top 6 tight end in year 1.
And this, I think, like Pitt's ranking amongst the tight ends is one of the things that highlights what I've said is we need to almost have 2 sets of rankings, one for teams that are playing for a 2021 title and one for teams that are not. Yeah. But I agree with you completely. I would not be surprised at all if he's the number 1 Dynasty tight end at the end of this year. I struggled with where he should be at the beginning of this year. I've currently got him number 3 amongst the tight ends. I've got him number 3 in my rookie rankings as well. It's funny because I noticed you had 3 tiers encompassing the first 5 players. 5 of those 6 are in my top 6. So there's not really much difference there. I kind of view them all as in a similar tier, but I do agree with you about Chase. He's the clear number 1 for me, unless you're playing in a super flex or a tight end premium.
I think that for me, it's a little bit of FOMO, I guess. It's a little bit of fear of missing out because we have pretty good wide receivers and running backs almost every single year, but how often do we get a tight end like this? It just doesn't happen. So while people are saying, it's an outlier, don't spend the top pick on a guy like that, but that's the biggest positional difference making potentially the biggest difference making player that we're going to have in this rookie draft, right? And if you had Travis Kelce for all 5 years where he finished 5 years straight as tight end 1, that's worth a number 1 overall pick to me. So it's just I don't want him. You can say all of the things. It never works out for tight end year 1, all of these things, but do you really want to miss out on a player like that when the other positions, the running backs, in my opinion, are not up to snuff compared to the 2020 class, and Jamar Chase is at the wide receiver position. But after that, I don't see an argument for taking any of the other players over Pitts.
It's really interesting. So where would you guys take Pitts right now in a startup dynasty league if you're drafting all tight ends? Heath, give me your top 4.
I'm sorry if I'm drafting all tight ends.
Well, I'm saying that it's not just obviously he's the number 1.
Where is Kyle Pitts in our tight end dynasty rankings? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've got him at number 3. I have Kittle and Kelce ahead of him, but I basically have Kittle, Kelce, Pitts, Andrews, and Waller all in a pretty similar range.
Okay, and Matt, how about you?
I think I've got him 1, man. I know that seems extreme, but we're part of fantasy football and part of Dynasty especially is projecting forward. So where is that player going to be valued a year from now, right? So Kelsey cannot increase his value. George Kittle is kind of, close to maxing out. He could take over the number one position with another year. Even if Kelsey finishes the tight end one again, he's not going to increase his value, right? So especially early in dynasty drafts where you're going to have to take a player like Kyle Pitts, you want to take players that they're going to have a chance to increase in value at the same time the following year. So that's why I have him number one, is just because of that projection and where I think he's going to be, because he has to get injured and miss the entire season or just completely fall on his face for him not to increase in value, in my opinion.
Okay, the next tier, so tier one is Jamar Chase and Kyle Pitts. The next tier is just two players. They're both running backs, and they went back-to-back in the NFL draft. And you have ETN and Harris. Do you have a strong preference between the two?
I personally have a slight preference for ETN just because I think his long-term outlook is a little bit better. You look at the roles for 2020, and if you're in a dynasty league, if your goal is to take the player and flip him the following year based on what he did in his rookie season, then I think Harris is the pick, because he's going to get the volume in year one. But after that, if Ben retires, that offensive line is terrible. Where is that team in 2021 without all of that? So I think he has potential to have a worse sophomore year than Travis Etienne. Etienne is going to presumably be sharing the backfield with James Robinson, at least from the start. Urban Meyer has said that they drafted Etienne as a third down back, which I would not believe that. They spent a late first round pick on him, right? So he's probably going to be more involved than we think he is. But for year one, he could potentially produce less than Harris. The other thing I'll say about that, though, is that Harris is, I think, a back that is going to need the volume that he's going to receive, whereas Etienne is kind of that home run threat, and he can succeed from fantasy on a much lower rush share or carry share, right? So I think it's possible that both of them have similar numbers at the end of the season, but Etienne has done it on a smaller workload.
And Heath, if you have a pick in your dynasty draft, they're both on the board. Who are you going with?
Yeah, I'm taking Harris kind of for the reasons that Matt said. I do think he'll be better in year one, and I do think there's a pretty good chance at the end of year one his value relative to Etienne's has gone up. But I don't necessarily disagree. I think Etienne has the higher long-term upside, but Harris has quite a bit more upside this year. And when you're talking about running backs, especially running backs coming into the league as old as these guys are, their window might only be 5 years. So year one for me is pretty important.
Okay, so let's go to the third tier. So it's Chase and Pitts in tier one, Etienne and Harris in tier two. This is interesting. Now you go Waddle, Javonte Williams, Devontae Smith, and I teased this a little earlier. A name that I don't typically see group with these guys is Rashad Bateman, who was a first-round pick wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens. So Waddle, Javonte Williams, Devontae Smith, and Rashad Bateman. Why do you have Bateman in that tier?
I actually have moved him down just one spot, but to the next tier. Okay. But I think from a talent standpoint, he belongs with those guys. And if you're going to ask the question mark, look at the question marks for each of these players. Bateman has, for me, the question with Bateman is the volume issue, right? But the reason why I had moved him up briefly was I made this mistake with AJ Brown. I was like, AJ Brown went to a bad situation and probably a low volume passing offense with Derrick Henry there, and the offense centered around him. And, I missed out on AJ Brown a lot. So that kind of scarred me a little bit. So not that Lamar Jackson is going to take off and throw the ball as much as, have a huge transition like Josh Allen did this year. But I do want to believe that they're going to open up it a little bit. They wouldn't have, I don't think they would have spent the pick on Bateman if they wanted to continue doing exactly the same thing. So, it gives them that reliable receiver that can be used all over the field. And I've always wanted Lamar Jackson to get kind of that reliable veteran that's going to be open when he knows he's going to be open, because I think Jackson is a better passer than we've given him credit for so far. It's just the offense that he's in and what he's asked to do right now. So he's kind of in the middle there between those two receivers and the running back, and then the next big group for me. So I could go either way, but right now I did move him down into that next group.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with that whole, long term, the whole situation. I mean, yeah. I do think that the likely odds are that he's going to beat out Marquise Brown for the number one wide receiver in targets within. I don't know that it'll happen in year one, just because, like you said, the volume is so low. His number of opportunities to really make that impact and prove to Lamar Jackson that he's the guy is smaller than an offense that's throwing it 40 times a game. If he was getting 7 targets a game as the third guy, he could make that transition a little bit quicker, I think. But I still believe, and this goes back into where I have Andrews as far as in the tight end rankings, I still believe that Mark Andrews is likely to be Lamar Jackson's number 1 target for as long as he's there. So if we're talking about the number 2 target in an offense that's going to run the ball 500 times, I get a little less excited. But I do think, like, Bateman's profile puts him in this category. This is really a test of how much landing spot matters to you and how good we are at predicting what landing spot's going to be 2 to 3 years from now.
100%. And one thing I will say is, I think it was 30% of the targets that Marquise Brown had over the second half of the season. It might be a little bit less than half the season, but I do think that if Bateman had that same amount of same target share, he would probably do more with it at this point. Minus the deep balls and stuff like that. If they were to connect on that, obviously that's going to inflate Marquise Brown's stats. But if Bateman has that kind of target share, then I think he can be fantasy relevant.
Yeah. Heath, you said that maybe he belongs. I would push back that he belongs in the same tier as Waddle and Smith.
Yeah,
because I said this. I think right after the draft. I think the night we did the first show or the second. I don't remember. That my first 3 picks in the draft would be Chase, Smith, Waddle in some order. But I would amend that to say Pitts. Put Pitts in there. I think I might go with 4 non-running backs before Harris or Etienne.
That's fair.
I want to know what you guys think about that, because you're playing the long game, but I understand that running backs can just have a bigger impact, right? Especially a guy that could be a 3-down running back. Harris has so much potential, and I love the landing spot. But I'm really excited about Chase Smith and Waddle. I think they could be stars. And I just wonder, do you just go best player available? Like, these guys are better prospects than the 2 running backs. And then obviously Pitts, it's an easy case to make, but Matt, what do you think about that idea of taking 4 non-running backs before Etienne or Harris come off the board?
It's not a terrible strategy. You want to draft for talent and trade for need, right? The problem though is that everybody needs running back. It's just the positional scarcity of that position, because there's 20 running backs that we feel pretty good about right now. If you want, you could maybe stretch it to 24, 25, but every team needs at least 2, and probably every team wants 3 or 4, right? So that kind of pushes up the value of those running backs. Whereas at receiver, you can go 40, maybe even 50 deep and still feel pretty good about the guys that you're going to be starting on a weekly basis. So the reason to draft running back before the receivers that aren't the Jamar Chase level prospect is just because of that positional value, and also the fact that they typically will have success earlier than the wide receivers, except for those really elite prospects, right? So it gives you an opportunity to increase their value and trade them for something else if you want to. So drafting the running backs ahead of the wide receivers that have a little bit of question marks can be profitable, but we like young wide receivers in Dynasty for sure.
Well, and I think long term, there's significantly less risk with Javonte Smith and to a certain extent Waddle too. But I'm a little concerned about what their rookie years look like. Yeah. And we still have questions about both of their quarterbacks. And so I don't think it's outside of the range of the possibilities. This year, they don't really have a major injury, but they have 650 receiving yards or something. And all of a sudden nobody's really wanting to give you a top 5 or 6 rookie pick for them, because they would like to see something first.
Well, look,
yeah,
I'm just saying that the last time 3 wide receivers were taken in the top 10, it was Corey Davis, Mike Williams, and John Ross. So,
there you go.
Out of mind, everybody. Okay. Now, what were you saying, Matt?
No, I was just gonna reiterate what Heath said there. That if wide receivers will typically hold some value, especially the ones that are drafted highly. It took, I guess, not necessarily John Ross, but Mike Williams definitely held his value for a while. Corey Davis was still, a very attractive player in the second and third year. So there is some truth to that. It's just that positional scarcity for me. The running backs are just the cheapest place to acquire a running back is in the rookie draft, because once they become elite, once they become elite assets, you can't pry them for less than 2 firsts in most cases, right? Even the older players like Dalvin Cook, who I saw was in your poll, you're not going to get him for a single first round pick in most cases. So the running back, I think, should be the last piece you add to your championship run, just because we value that youth, and then the cheapest place to do that is in the rookie draft.
Okay, so then let's just go through one more tier here. Make sure we have time for some buy low and sell high, and then those Twitter polls you mentioned and all that. I'll put Rashad Bateman in this next tier then. We'll put him in the 4th tier with Elijah Moore for the Jets, Rondale Moore for the Cardinals, Terrace Marshall, wide receiver for the Panthers, and then Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, and Justin Fields. You got 3 quarterbacks off the board here, Lawrence, Lance, Fields, but 4 wide receivers, Bateman, Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, Terrace Marshall, and then Lawrence, Lance, and Fields. What kind of impact are you expecting from this group? Are we looking, especially the wide receivers, with Bateman, the 2 Moores, and Marshall? Are we looking at guys that you think could be great or could be number 2 receivers? What do you think?
I think all of these guys have a chance to be great. Both Moores are 2 of my favorite players in this draft. The Jets are tough because of the history we have with that team, right? But we have to keep in mind it's a new coaching staff, it's a new quarterback, all of that stuff. So, and Elijah Moore has all the potential in the world to play. He's going to start out in the slot, obviously, but I think he has some potential to play outside. And then Rondale Moore is my favorite player in the entire draft. And I'm a Packer fan, so if he couldn't land with the Packers, I think the Cardinals are probably the best. Is probably the best place for him. They have that horizontal offense. It's going to be so fun to watch those 2 little guys and Kyler Murray and Rondale Moore out there doing their thing, right? So he has potential, I think, to be just like a PPR cheat code. And then Terrace Marshall, he fell a little bit. I think was due to some medical issues that aren't really a concern, and land in a place with 2 other very good receivers. But I think he could, potentially take over for Robbie Anderson. Probably not in year 1, but second half of year 1, he's going to get a lot more play. And we hope Sam Bradford is going to be rejuvenated with Joe Brady there. So those receivers, I think all of them have the potential to jump into that next tier, just a tier above them. It's just they have a few more question marks than those guys above them.
Rondale Moore and Terrace Marshall are the 2 guys that I'm having a hard time not getting irrationally excited about.
I know, right?
I really like both of them. When I can see myself in the mirror saying you like them more than you should.
Yeah.
But I do think the interesting question with Lawrence is what do you think is the highest someone can reasonably take him in a rookie draft if quarterback is their biggest need?
I think the top of this tier. I think right after the top 7 there, I think it's reasonable to consider Lawrence if you need a quarterback, or even if you don't, if it's a luxury pick, maybe you're set up, maybe you're a contender who has an old quarterback, and you're stacked everywhere else and you just want to secure the future. I think it's reasonable to go there. So all 3 of these quarterbacks I think are reasonable end of the first round picks. I don't know if I personally would do it, just because it's really easy to stream quarterbacks, even in Dynasty, in a 1 quarterback format. It's pretty easy to do in most cases. And if I don't want to spend my first round pick on a quarterback in a rookie draft, I can probably go trade my second round pick for almost any quarterback that isn't in the top 8 to 10 players. So it just depends on where you want to spend that money. If you rather to take more of a lottery pick on one of these receivers that could really break out, or if you want to spend that on locking down your quarterback position for the next however many years, decade, whatever.
We're going to take a quick break on fantasy football today. When we come back, I'll ask Matt and Heath players that they want to target in the 2nd and the 3rd rounds of their dynasty drafts. All right, we're back here on Fantasy Football Today, joined by Matt Price, senior writer for Dynasty League Football, zookeeper as well. We hope to have time to ask him some more crazy news stories and not the depressing ones that I asked about. So, all right, now we're done with, I'll just recap everybody, the tiers that we went through. Tier 1 was Chase and Pitts. Tier 2 was ETN and Harris. Tier 3 was Waddle, Javonte Williams, and Devontae Smith. And then Tier 4, Rashad Bateman, Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, Terrace Marshall, and the first 3 quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, and Justin Fields. So now we're done with basically a round. And who are some of your favorite players that are going to go late in the second and third rounds of dynasty drafts?
I mentioned Dyami Brown earlier. Amari Rodgers is very interesting. If Aaron Rodgers does come back, that seems like a big question mark right now. I think that could be a disastrous situation for Amari Rodgers if it is Jordan Love under center. Kadarius Toney, I'm coming around on. I think I'm probably still lower on him than most people, but he does have that first round draft capital. For me, the situation is a little bit murky with all of those receivers there. But Paul Perticchese over the Saturday to Sunday podcast, he pointed out, that it could be very well that the rest of those guys are gone next season, and including Jason Garrett. If you're not thrilled with his, creative play calling, that might be a little bit overblown because he could just be gone. And going into 2022, it could just be Galladay and Kadarius Toney there. So I probably have him a little bit too low. And then Ross St. Brown, he's very interesting just because of the situation. There's no reliable receivers there in Detroit. You have Hawkinson and as the only really reliable receiver, and then the other guys are just they're mostly deep ball threats. So Jared Goff, we know, likes that intermediate target with Cooper Kupp, one of my favorite players. So you don't want to say that Amon-Ra St. Brown is the next Cooper Kupp necessarily, but I think he has the potential to be that kind of safety blanket for Jared Goff.
And I think it's so dependent on your draft. But there are going to be a lot of drafts where one of, or maybe two of Rondale Moore and Terrace Marshall or Rashad Bateman are there early in the second round. That's going to happen a lot. When they don't, I still like Trey Sermon, largely because I like running backs who are going to eventually get a chance in San Francisco. that usually works out if you get the ball handed to you in San Francisco. And then I agree completely about St. Brown. He's a guy who might have been early in the third round in a different situation with the NFL draft. Now I think I really like him in the middle of the second round. And he might jump up after year one just because of the volume he sees to someone views as like a top 5 or 6 wide receiver from this class. And I think he might be a top 5 or 6 receiver in terms of rookie production. So yeah, I like St. Brown quite a bit. And I don't have any problem at all with taking Justin Fields early in the second either.
When you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I know there's a lot of reason to like the landing spot and all that stuff, but he was a 4th round pick, and he was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I think I lost count. I think he was the 16th wide receiver selected, something like that. There's not a lot of hits on guys who are selected that late at the position, but this was, I guess, a pretty good class. But there aren't that many great players that come out of day 3. I say that all the time. So why not take a shot on Zach Wilson or Mac Jones ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown, ahead of Nico Collins, even Dyami Brown, who I know you're pretty high on. Heath, did I cut you off there? Did you want to jump in there?
Well, I did, because for me, and I think the Dyami Brown for sure, you can have that conversation, and you can have the conversation about, well, not a whole lot of other guys once you get to the middle of the second, because you get to about pick 21 and I just don't want to play anymore. But for Zach Wilson and Mac Jones, if you're in a 1 quarterback league, I don't know that they have the upside to ever be a pot. Like, if I'm starting them, I'm still going to have one of the worst quarterbacks in the league at that point. It's just that they made it to their upside as a top 12 quarterback.
He was the number 2 pick in the draft. I mean, there are a lot of really bad players who went quarterbacks who went number 2 overall. I get that, but
right.
I mean, he was the 2nd best player at his position, not the 16th best. I don't know that his.
Do you think that he has the upside to be a top 6 quarterback?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I'm not in year 1. Gosh, definitely not. Is that what you meant, or you meant overall?
No, I don't. And I could be wrong. I just don't see that as really a very likely.
No, I wouldn't say it's likely, but I think he has more chance to be relevant and top 12 than Amon-Ra St. Brown or Dyami Brown do, because I think at that point
top 12 for sure. But you need to start the top 40 wide receivers.
Right, but a top 12, okay. But I think a top 12 quarterback, I think Zach Wilson is going to have a better chance to be fantasy relevant than Amon-Ra St. Brown after year 1.
I just think you need to you need to go after if in a one quarterback league, there are so few difference makers at the position, and can those two guys be a difference maker? Neither of them are going to run nearly as much as the other three quarterbacks in this draft. And let me just read you. I mean, the list of the top quarterbacks is ridiculous, and it's Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, and then we got Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, and then Justin Fields. I just don't. It just seems so hard for those two to crack that spot. The one thing I will say though is that historically, even in one quarterback leagues, rookie quarterbacks drafted highly increase their value from year one to year two, even ones that don't necessarily perform well in their rookie year. So you do have that feather in your hat. I just don't see the rushing upside from those two to be a true difference maker in one quarterback.
I think an interesting guy, and we're going to transition to buy lows in just a minute. So this is me making that transition for Adam.
Great.
Tua, I have noticed that it does not seem like any. Like I'm in a startup right now, and he was like the 22nd quarterback or something taking. It does not seem like anybody has any interest in Tua right now. I don't value Wilson or Mac Jones anywhere close to Tua.
Agree.
And so that's the thing. And I still don't know if Tua is going to be good or not, but he has. I'm more excited about having him on a roster than I am either of those two.
100%.
I don't really like Mac Jones much. I'm very happy he didn't go third overall, because it would have made me feel like I was a total idiot, because I trust the Niners organization, and he was never really in play for them. I don't, he's not it doesn't seem like he's a special quarterback. I listened to what all the experts had to say, and all the experts like, yeah, this guy's really good. He's super smart, but he's not a top 10 pick, and he didn't go there. So that's fine. But Zach Wilson, I think I feel like we're selling him a little bit short, just because I honestly think it's because he went to the Jets, and the Jets have they're just a bad franchise, but
he had questions though about there's plenty to question about him just as a prospect.
We can talk about him as a prospect if you want to. I don't know how deep you want to get, but I do have a personal bias against him. I think his decision making is extremely questionable. He's overconfident in his arm. There's several plays. I think one was against Houston where it was this little flea flicker, and he threw it into coverage while there was a guy sitting in the end zone. So I just don't think he sees the whole field well. And then he does this little jump throw back across his body. That's just gonna. I don't think it's gonna work in the NFL. So I think early on in his career, he's gonna have to be more hidden than featured, if that makes any sense. Like, you're gonna have to hide his mistakes more than you're gonna be able to feature his assets. So he could develop, absolutely, but it's so tough to see success for him in year one.
I agree in year one, but I think the Jets, I don't think they're going to have a very good offense this year, but you can certainly see them having a good offense at some point soon. Maybe it's 2022. They've invested in their offensive line. They invested in wide receiver. They hopefully have found their answer at quarterback. They may not be a bad offense for much longer, and they got rid of Adam Gase, so that's good. All right, so let's go to the buy lows. I guess, Heath, you just made your case for Tua. Anyone else you want to talk about?
Yeah, and some of these are just it'll be more interesting probably to hear everyone else's, because I have talked about these guys quite a bit. But I'm buying low right now based on what the consensus rankings are on Lamar Jackson, on Josh Jacobs, and on Juju Smith-Schuster. And I looked at the consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros. I don't know exactly what ADP is, but in the startup, they were pretty close to what just happened. Josh Jacobs is an end of the 4th round pick. Juju is a early round 6 pick, and Lamar Jackson was quarterback 5 behind Kyler, Josh Allen, and I think Dak. And I just think I think Lamar is the most likely quarterback over the next 3 to 5 years to be the second best quarterback in fantasy. And I still believe Juju and Jacobs are still young, and that feels like they're almost going later in Dynasty than they are in redraft. And that doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Okay. And you want to follow up on that, Matt, or do you want to give your own list?
I mean, I can comment on that. I think Juju's a good call. I don't have the May ADP for DLF yet, but in April he was going off as the 49th player overall. So just early 5th round. And, I just think it's hard to separate him from Claypool and Deontay Johnson. I just don't know how you separate that production for those three for this season, but he only signed that 1-year deal, and he could certainly be moving on to better pastures next year. And he's only 24 years old, so I like that call quite a bit. For Lamar Jackson, I never moved him from quarterback 2. I know he's been moving up and down dynasty rankings, all the way down to like 7 in some cases at the quarterback position. I don't know. I don't see it. So always been 2 for me. Do you want me to just go right into my
I would say that I would probably take Kyler Murray over him, and I think
I can see it. I mean,
yeah, he's going to run for a lot more
tier
than Josh Allen. It's tough. It's tough in redraft and it's tough in dynasty. And I'd probably take Zach Wilson over all of them anyway. So
of course,
yeah. Who are your buy lows, Matt?
I have a bunch, so I'll just throw some names out there. A lot of the second-year receivers that kind of disappointed a little bit. Judy, we didn't feel as good about. He was the second in the class, number 1 for some people last season over CeeDee Lamb. But Judy, I think, is interesting. Rager was injured. Now he doesn't have to be the number 1 necessarily. Michael Pittman, they didn't really add anything to the receiving game for Indianapolis, so he profiles. He could be a number 1. I think he's better as a number 2, but he could be a number 1 in that particular offense if Hilton continues to slide. And then a little bit deeper, Gabriel Davis and Buffalo kind of came on at the end of the season. They did add Emmanuel Sanders, but long-term Gabriel Davis is probably the 2 there. Darnell Mooney just got a significant quarterback upgrade. Brian Edwards, we're not really talking about. I kind of like him more than Henry Ruggs, to be honest with you. And again, Las Vegas didn't really do much to help out that passing game. So he's interesting for year 2. And then even deeper, we'll go to Donovan Peoples-Jones, who flashed a little bit at the end of the season for Cleveland. So if that passing game continues to take a step forward, he's very interesting.
Matt, I had 2 questions. And the first was, because I love the calls of both Judy and Pittman, where would you rank them compared to this year's rookies as far as rookie wide receivers?
They would be below Chase for sure. But in that next group, I think definitely I would probably, I think I would have Judy for sure in the same tier as Waddle and Devonta Smith, and Rager probably just right below that area. So and then Pittman, probably about that same range. I would say I would rather have Rondale Moore probably, but definitely would be still in the first round, I think.
We are it seems to be on Twitter, it's Mecole Hardman week. So is he a buy low or a sell high?
I don't think if he's either of those, he's probably a buy low. I don't think he's a sell high unless the hype is higher than I've seen so far. But I don't mind buying him. He's just, I don't know. I don't think his true value is going to be unlocked unless we miss some time with Tyreek Hill, So I just don't know if he's that reliable number 2. Some people have been talking about Byron Pringle. I don't know. They seem to like him, but then they drafted somebody late to Cornell Powell or something like that. Yeah. So I don't know. The opportunity definitely seems to be there, but can he capitalize it on? I'm not sure.
Can you tell me where I have 2 buy low suggestions, and I'll kind of frame it, and you need some context. James Robinson and DJ Moore. Do you have that ADP up from April? Where yes. Robinson is obviously,
his is definitely plummeted. I'm sure in May, but let me tell you, find out where he is right now.
And I will look and see where he just went in this startup.
Okay. Look, I don't know if you should have super high expectations for James Robinson, but if I would probably give up a 3rd round pick in a rookie only draft for him if I need some
for sure.
back depth this year. People might think that he's going to be completely useless. I don't think that's the case, at least not early in the year.
He went the first pick of round 6.
Okay.
In this startup, post-draft startup.
That feels
he went much earlier in April ADP, obviously running back 20 in the end of the 3rd round. So that is definitely falling quite a bit. I think the 7th round is probably closer to true value once you get past the other back end, guys that like the 20 to 24 guys like Jacobs, where he is currently, David Montgomery, Chris Carson. Once you get into that range, I think after those guys, he like before Melvin Gordon, for instance, I think I would probably take him before then. So kind of in that late 20s to early 30s range at running back.
It was an interesting run because Carson actually went right before him, and then it went Robinson, Sermon, Michael Carter.
Oh, I think I'd definitely take Carter over Robinson.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like
It's tough.
We've never like Michael Carter didn't just lose his job, so that's good. But I don't know that Michael Carter ever has really the potential to do what James Robinson did last year.
No,
probably not. But I don't think James Robinson has the potential to do what James Robinson did last year anymore. You know, obviously, if ETN gets hurt, it's a different story. I just think there are enough draft analysts that loved Michael Carter that I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. And I guess I'm a Jets fan all of a sudden.
It seems like you're a Jets fan.
What about DJ Moore? Because DJ Moore is only 24 years old, just like Juju. He's been top 10 in receiving yards 2 straight seasons. That is really the only thing you need to know. He's really good. Just doesn't catch enough touchdowns. But I don't know when that problem is going to be solved. I don't know if it's going to be this year. But when did DJ Moore go? Or when was his ADP last year? And Heath, when did he go in the draft?
Yeah, I don't think he is a buy low at all. I don't think the Dynasty community is giving up on DJ Moore in any shape, fashion, or form. He was a second-round pick in this startup.
Yeah, in April, wide receiver 9 and the late second-round pick, early third-round pick. We're not giving up on DJ Moore. So
then let me spin that to redraft, because I think the Dynasty community knows what DJ Moore's potential is. When I see him going in round 4 or 5, I think in redraft leagues, he still feels like a great value to me. Anyway. So I like him. That's the bottom line. Sell high. Heath, you said one of my 2 guys that I was going to suggest is definitely a sell high. And the 2 guys I had were Davante Adams with this whole Aaron Rodgers uncertainty, and also the fact that he'll be 29 years old at the end of the year. He'll be 29 in December. And Travis Kelce, who will be 32 years old in October. Matt, I believe, mentioned it earlier. 5 straight seasons as the number 1 tight end in PPR leagues. I would guess that in the modern era of fantasy football, whatever the hell that means, there has never been a player that has finished number 1 at his position 5 straight years other than Travis Kelce. But which one is the sell high?
I think you just said that Travis Kelce is the greatest fantasy football player of all time.
He's up. He's got to be up there. He's not that
as far as impact goes relative to his position. That might just be true. I also think, like, even if you're contending this year, Travis Kelce is probably the best sell high, because it seems like for a lot of people, I think in our startup, he went in the second round, and we did a startup mock just a month ago, and I think he went at the end of round 1. And I like that. I'm the guy who like really pushes Travis Kelce in the first round in redraft, but in Dynasty, it's like, if you do that, then you better just start drafting, just forget about age and use your redraft rankings and win a title this year. And if I don't have a good team around Kelce, like, he is my top priority to get rid of. He may be number 1 again this year, but it's very, very close to the end of that run.
I want to compare. I did this a few months ago when we talked Dynasty. I want to compare him to Tony Gonzalez, because so Kelce's going to turn 32 in October, and he only has 111 games played. When Tony Gonzalez turned 32, he had played 174 games through his age 31 season. So a little bit less wear and tear, a lot less on Kelce than Gonzalez. And where did Tony Gonzalez finish in PPR leagues after turning 32, which is what Kelce will be this year? One thing to note before I even give these numbers, he only played 1 more year with Kansas City, and then he went to Atlanta for the final 5 years of his career. He was, starting at age 32, Tony Gonzalez was tight end 1, tight end 6, tight end 6, tight end 4, tight end 2, and tight end 4 in his last 6 seasons. So he never finished lower than 6th. He finished 4th or better 4 of the 6 seasons. He finished 1st or 2nd twice. I'm certainly not saying Kelce will do that, but it is just interesting to know that Gonzalez, who played a lot more games and changed teams, was really damn good as a tight end going forward. So I don't know, Matt, what do you think about Kelce? When would you draft him in a redraft league?
In a redraft league, I think he's absolutely
in a startup dynasty league.
In a startup dynasty, I'm probably. It really depends, because I have plenty of teams that are strong competitors that are all old, that kind of thing. But I think at this point in a dynasty league, especially in the first few rounds where you're going to have to take Kelce, I want to take players who have a chance to increase in value, and that's not Kelce. He could certainly maintain value, because we don't care about age as much as the tight end position, like you just mentioned with another Hall of Famer there, right? So I think there's an argument for it. I personally wouldn't do it. I do think Heath is right, though, that if you want to maximize your return on Kelsey, like now is the time to do it after coming off a historic season, 5 straight years of the tight end one overall. Like this is the time to do it. Is he still going to be a top 5 tight end this year? Absolutely. Probably next year, maybe the year after that. So he can still be a key piece of a dynasty team, right? Over the next few years, if we're going to play in this 2 to 3 year window. But maximizing return, I think you got to sell him this season.
Who are you selling high on, Matt?
I've got a handful. Some of these I think are probably pretty obvious, though. I think all of the running backs that avoided getting usurped by one of the top rookies. So that's Myles Gaskin. Again, he'll probably have a very good season this year, but one injury, his value is done. Any kind of an unproductive streak, his value is gone. Same with Mike Davis. You mentioned that news blurb earlier. And then Chase Edmonds. This one is really interesting because I think Chase Edmonds is considered a big winner in this draft. All 3 of these guys really, right? But Chase Edmonds specifically because they didn't add anybody of significance. They added James Conner, but we don't really know what to expect about him. But if James Conner ends up being the short yardage and goal line back and taking that aspect away from Chase Edmonds, and then Rondale Moore kind of becomes an extension of the running game as that short area target, taking away those short receptions for Edmonds, then he could be in a really bad spot. So while these 3 guys look like winners coming out of the draft, I want to go ahead and take the opportunity to get out now while their value is probably the highest. The best time to do it would have been before the draft, but this is the second best time. And then one last guy, Brandon Ayuk, who I do like as a player, but he broke out when all of those parts in San Francisco were hurt, right? Kittle was out, Debo was out, and Ayuk flourished. So with both those guys back healthy with a new quarterback where they might want to do a little bit more running, even more than they did last season, then he seems to be somebody who might fall a little bit from year 1 to year 2 in terms of his value.
And I've got one more that Adam will hate, so that's what I like to bring to the table. Mike Evans, I think. I know, Adam, you're right. He's always good for fantasy, and he has been. But he's a 28-year-old receiver. I don't know what his current ADP is, but he went wide receiver 12 in this recent startup we just did, and I think that's pretty close to where his consensus ranking is as well. If you're 28 years old and you're wide receiver 12 in Dynasty, then you had better be a top 4 or 5 Dynasty wide receiver this year and next year, I'm hoping. And I just don't think he is that. The targets last year were awful. The yards, he's got 1 year in his last 4 with more than 1,150 yards, which is like, that's good, but that's a borderline top 12 wide receiver. We know the touchdowns aren't going to repeat themselves, and it's so crowded in Tampa Bay and so uncertain with Tom Brady over how long this is going to last. I would like to get, if I could get top 12 value for Mike Evans in Dynasty, I would love that.
He is.
I don't hate that at all. Yeah.
He's 20, wide receiver 20 in April ADP. I'm guessing he's fallen since then a little bit. Lower. So yeah, he is lower there. And I think you could make a case for even moving him lower than that. Like the guy you mentioned earlier, Juju is just below him, Chase Claypool just below him, Devontae Smith just below him, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Deontay Johnson, Kenny Golladay. I mean, I think there's an argument to move him even lower than that. So,
I've got him 28.
Yeah, that seems fair.
That probably feels low to me. Because I just think he's not talked about as one of the best wide receivers in football, but his production, he's not one of the very best, but his production is ridiculous. I mean, 1,000 yards every year of his career. I love the offense. I love the quarterback who's going to be there for a long time, it seems.
But week to week, like he is maddening week to week.
He was this past year. I think this was pretty inconsistent year. I don't really know what to make of that. I just know that at the end of the year, he's going to have 1,000 yards and could have 8 touchdowns. So I'm probably going to be higher than him than most in redraft leagues. But yeah, I know what you're saying in Dynasty. I get it. He should not be the 12th wide receiver taken in a startup Dynasty league for sure. I want to throw this out there on Davante Adams. Just the last time he played without Aaron Rodgers, I was surprised. I didn't remember how good he was. He had played 8 games. Rodgers threw, I think, 4 passes in that Minnesota game in 2017. So, and he didn't throw any touchdowns or anything. So I included that as a game without Aaron Rodgers. And those 8 games that year, Davante Adams had 46 catches, 543 yards, 5 touchdowns on 71 targets. So that's 92 catches, nearly 1,100 yards, and 10 touchdowns on 142 targets over 16 games. Brett Hundley was his quarterback. He had a 70.6 passer rating that season. And an aging Jordy Nelson. Nelson only played one more year. Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb were both on that team. Adams only played 14 games, and he led the team in receiving. He led the team in touchdowns. He played 8 of those games without Aaron Rodgers, so I was surprised. That was really, I mean, he hadn't really completely busted out yet. You know, it's been the last 3 years for him since that year where he's been one of the elite wide receiver in fantasy, you could argue. So that was interesting. He did great with Brett Hundley at quarterback in 2017. He might not have Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback much longer. So just that, those are just numbers to know. He is great, but he is also 28 years old and will be 29 in December. Let's take a look at these Twitter polls to compare some of the rookies to some of the veterans. I wish if I had been smart, I would have included the age in the wide receiver poll. I know I did it in the rookie poll, but the first one was, who is your favorite in a dynasty league? Davante Adams, Jamar Chase, or Tyreek Hill? And Heath, who do you think won this poll?
I would assume, I'm going to guess Tyreek Hill.
You're correct. He had 50% of the vote, 49%. And it was basically even between Davante Adams and Jamar Chase, between 25.3% and 25.8%. Who would you take, Hill, Adams, or Chase?
I would take Adams.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I know you put all those stats out there with him missing without Aaron Rodgers, but if it's Aaron Rodgers, then it's Davante Adams, and if it's not, I think it's Tyreek Hill. But you know, Jamar Chase is really good, and if you're building from a youth approach, then I could see Chase above both of them as well.
And look, those stats were good, but they weren't amazing. It was 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns. That's going to be great, but he could be even better than that, obviously.
I think most dynasty players probably have Tyreek above him at this point anyway. You know, a slot or two.
All right, who's your favorite in a dynasty league? I will use the age they will be by the middle of the 2021 season. Dalvin Cook, age 26. Najee Harris, age 23. Alvin Kamara, age 26. DeAndre Swift, age 22. So you've got Cook and Kamara, age 26, Harris at age 23, and DeAndre Swift at age 22. And the results pretty even in this poll. Heath, who did you vote for, and who did you mean to vote for?
I accidentally voted for DeAndre Swift. I meant to vote for Dalvin Cook, but those two are both in my top 5, and my confidence in my ability to win in 2021 would be the tiebreaker between the two. But I obviously love Swift.
Yeah, well, they are in first and second place. People would rather have, according to this poll, DeAndre Swift ahead of Alvin Kamara and Najee Harris. So it went Cook 32%, Swift 28%, Kamara 24%, Harris 16%.
I would probably have Kamara up ahead of Swift if they approved the rule request to ban Taysom Hill from playing quarterback. But I just believe Sean Payton's going to choose Taysom Hill.
Matt, what do you think about Cook, Harris, Kamara, and Swift?
Yeah, Kamara is still number one for me. He had one good game with Taysom Hill, so that's true. I'm still confident. And you know, he's between the two older guys and Kamara and Cook. I have more faith in Kamara's ability to stay healthy. He seems to be someone who is very good at shedding, those big hits, whereas Dalvin Cook takes big hits all the time. And either one of these guys, though, one significant injury to them this year, and their dynasty value is tanked. Like this is pretty much the last season. You know, kind of similar to the Kelsey conversation. If you want to get peak value on these guys, now is the time to sell, even if you might miss out on an elite season this year.
Okay, so you go Kamara number one.
Yeah.
Is there any case for Najee Harris over DeAndre Swift? Swift is actually younger than Harris.
I don't think so at this point. I mean, just like the team that they're on, that's the only thing I think you can really hang your hat on there, right? Is, you know, running backs on good teams are typically better than running backs on bad teams. So you could hang your hat on that, but otherwise I don't think so.
Counterpoint, Anthony Lynn.
Fair.
But that's it. And I don't know, like the Lions are probably going to have a better offensive line this year, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure. They appear to have a very good offensive or a above average offensive line.
They might have a better quarterback.
And the Steelers, Steelers have last year they had one of the worst. And I don't know that it's getting any better. maybe addition by subtraction. I'm trying to find the stat. I have it in some note of mine somewhere, but you're absolutely right, Matt, that running backs on good teams are better. It's better to be on a good team than a bad team. But I think because running backs catch a lot of passes now more than ever. It was a little bit of a step back last year. It's less important. So I just looked in PPR leagues. I looked over the last 5 or 6 seasons, how many running backs finished top 12 while not being on a top 12 offense, something like that. The bottom line is it keeps going up. It was like 3, then 4, then 5, then 5, something like that. So it's easier now. Christian McCaffrey is living proof. They've had a kind of 20th-ish ranked offense recently. It's easier now to be an elite running back on a not great offense than it ever was. Okay, scariest zoo story, and then I'll let you go. Go back to sleep.
Like personally, my personal scariest zoo story is not super exciting. I had when I was an intern in 2000. Geez, that's been a long time. When I was an intern at the San Francisco Zoo, I worked in the children's zoo area, and we had this big steer that we would halter up and walk from place to place. And I was kind of, I was at the point where I was getting kind of complacent and, not necessarily paying 100% to what I was doing when putting his halter on, and also talking to a guest at the same time. And he did one of these like buck ups with his head and kind of threw me to the ground, and then kind of stood over me with his horns, like just basically right at my face, and like breathing that, you see from the cartoons, the bull exhales and that big puff of exhale comes out. And that's what it was. That was my scariest zoo moment as an intern. So, nothing scary with any of the polar bears or any of the really, really actual scary animals. But I definitely was afraid in that moment.
Yeah, I'm afraid right now. Just hearing. Heath, any zoo questions?
I thought you had a whole list, so I was just kind of sitting here coasting, enjoying the answers. So
I so fascinating. I mean, zoos are great. I can't wait to go to the zoo. We can go to the Bronx Zoo pretty soon. Yeah. Anything like do you have a favorite animal that you can work with or anything? My
favorite animals are currently is polar bear. My second favorite animal is maybe one that people don't know as much about. It's called a tapir, TAPIR. They're my favorite variety is the Malayan tapir. They're the black and white ones. I can tell a quick, like, kind of heartwarming story about those guys if you want.
Yeah, sure. Heath and I were just talking about Malayan tapirs the other day, so this is perfect.
Nice. Yeah. So I work with helped raise one in at the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle about 11 or 12 years ago at this point. And kind of the general thinking about hoofstock or animals that have hooves they're not super intelligent, right? They're herd animals, and tapirs are not herd animals, but they do qualify as hoofstock. So typically they're viewed as something that's not quite as smart as maybe a primate, of course, or a carnivore or whatever. But there was one morning I remember it was like a fall morning, and there was like one piece of one piece of browse. A browse is like a piece of a tree, like a branch with some leaves on it, right? So there was one piece left on this one tree, and I looked out in the yard, and I saw the mom kind of sitting like a dog would sit. If you can picture how a dog sits, kind of like that. And tapirs, the way they communicate vocally is with these little whistles and chirps. So I heard her whistle and chirp, and the baby came over. The mom could just not, the piece of browse was just, the foliage was just out of her reach. So she whistled, brought the kid over. The kid kind of went up on her front 2 legs, put him on mom's shoulders, and was able to grab that last piece of browse, and they shared it together. So you have, quote unquote, dumb animals doing problem solving things to be able to feed themselves in unique ways. So I thought that was pretty neat.
Well, that's really cool. That is a great story. That's like me and Heath making a draft pick together. Some animals doing some problem solving.
Yeah.
And we got some video for those of you who are listening. If you want to go to youtube.com/fantasyfootball today, you can see that was Shaggy B putting up the Malayan tapir. That was good.
Fancy graphics here.
Good job, Schrager. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. I would like to have an all zoo episode at one point, but we'll probably have to sprinkle in some Dynasty next time we have you on as well. But we really appreciate it. Thanks for getting up, and thanks for giving us all this info, and tell us how we can follow you and what to listen to and all that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It was a blast. I love talking Dynasty and rookies anytime. You can follow me at Matt Price FF on Twitter. All of my work's over at dynastyleaguefootball.com. I do the flagship episode with Ryan McDowell and Dan Myler, and then also do Dynasty Game Night, which is kind of like a game show based on fantasy football. So if you're into game shows, that might be a show you'd be interested in checking out. Yeah, everything's on at dynastyleaguefootball.com.
I have participated in Dynasty Game Night, and I think Adam, that's a program that you should subscribe to, because Adam has tried to play some games on this podcast before, and yeah,
I almost brought some to play with you guys, but I wasn't sure if there was time.
I think they would call me as a game show host. They would call me Hoovstock.
Yeah,
it is a callback.
Exactly.
That is Matt Price, Ed Heath Cummings, and Ben Schrager. I am Adam Azer. It was our longest episode in a while, but it was a Dynasty episode, so we better go overtime for that. Hope you all enjoyed it. We'll come back later this week to react to the schedule. We got time for your emails and Apple Podcast questions as well. Talk to you soon.